Okay, let's get started. My name is Sarah Julian. I am the owner of OffLeash Communications. For those of you that I know, hello. It's a thrill to have you here, and I appreciate you coming. For those of you I don't know, I'm honored that you decided to spend the next half hour or 45 minutes with me, and hopefully the information that I provide to you is going to be helpful in setting the stage for a very successful 2017. I'm going to tell you a little bit about who we are, and then we're going to get into the meat of the presentation. So OffLeash Communications is a 5-year-old branding and marketing agency. We're dedicated to the pet product and services industry. It's the only industry we've ever served, and it's the audience that we know, it's the business that we know, and we love it. We really wouldn't work in any other industry, as a matter of fact. And our aim is to provide companies with a unique position in a very cluttered marketplace. So it's so fragmented, and we're going to talk about that a little bit on some of the next slides, but it's very easy to get lost in this industry. And so we really want to carve out uniqueness and help our clients stand out from the competition, and then guide their marketing strategy to reach the consumers that need them most. Long gone are the days when you could simply put a product on the shelf and consumers would find you. Now, whether it's your brick and mortar shelf or the digital shelf, you really have to have a strategy for how you're going to push your products onto the retail shelf and then how to pull them back off on the other end. So we are going to work through some of the ways that you can set the stage for making those types of things happen. I have personally been in the pet industry for 12 years. It's been a crazy 12 years, starting as marketing manager of the dog and cat toy category for a company called Aspen Pet Products. And then most recently, prior to launching OffLeash, I served as Director of Corporate Communication for PetMate. I have experience in product development, lifecycle management, integrated communications, marketing strategy, and branding. But my passion lies with strategy and branding, and I'm hoping that what I'm able to provide to you will help you be more successful. We've worked with a wide variety of businesses within the industry over the last 5 years to both craft their brands, find them unique positions in the marketplace, and to create and execute their strategies. We consider them partners, and we've loved working with every single one of these companies. So my goal today, as I mentioned, is to make sure that my experience and my knowledge makes your job easier and you more successful. So let's get started. You've signed up for our presentation on how to create your 2017 strategic marketing roadmap. So this is going to be all about the questions you need to both ask and answer in order to set your strategic plan for next year. I hope you'll use the information to guide your year-end marketing analysis and planning activities. And this extends beyond you to your entire team, and sometimes, depending on the size of your company, to the whole company. Because if you follow the steps and the questions that we're going to ask today, you'll be able to build next year's strategy from a place of knowledge. And that's really what it's all about. Marketing is about knowing what you've done, what worked, what didn't, and how to do it better next time. So hopefully you will put all of this information to good use to set yourself, your team, and your company up for success and aim for an amazing 2017. So let's just make sure that we're all talking about the same industry. The pet product industry is a wonderful place to build a business, but it has significant challenges that make it always an adventure, right? This is always an adventurous place to work. First of all, as I said, this is a very fragmented and cluttered industry. That second one slipped right in. It's fragmented and cluttered. It's got a low barrier to entry on a lot of the categories that we all work in, which means that there are a lot of people that start businesses. It's fantastic. It's very entrepreneurial, but it also causes a lot of chatter. And the chatter is very difficult for consumers to find their way through. And so I think one of the goals of every company is to find a voice and a message that resonates and gets away from that clutter. Secondly, obviously, is that this is still a cottage industry. And it's so strange because technically this industry is huge. I mean, consumer spending on pet products surpassed consumer spending on alcohol in 2014. It's a no joke industry. So it's interesting that we still act small, we still act disorganized. And I think that's because a lot of the businesses in this industry are still family run, and we even have a significant portion that are still run out of their homes. And so the fact that the feeling is that it's a cottage industry will always have an impact on how we play in the landscape. The third are consumer concerns. So consumers, because they consider their pets family and sometimes even children, there is a huge emphasis on quality control and safety. This isn't going anywhere. The interesting part has been the ramp up in concerns around sourcing of all materials and ingredients that has really hit the industry in the last couple of years. And although a lot of this has been around consumables, I think more and more US made, high quality, high control, ethical manufacturing, all of these things are really coming into play, and the pet industry is having to address them. And I think each company is learning how to answer the questions that consumers are asking. There is and will be, for the foreseeable future, a high demand for natural, eco-friendly ingredients, products, and packaging. Anytime that you can move in this direction, I would always recommend it. And then there's this idea of differentiation. This industry is a tough one to differentiate in because once upon a time, you could put a furry face on a package and it sold. I mean, puppies are adorable. But now everyone has a dog with a social media channel that looks just like every other dog and looks just like the dogs that you and every other company are using. So how do you possibly visually differentiate on top of your message? How do you get away from what we call at OffLeash furry marketing and into something original? Because at the end of the day, your business deserves better than furry marketing. And that's where we believe strategy comes in. So some interesting information about strategy, just to make everybody in the room feel comfortable. 76% of people feel marketing has changed more in the past 2 years than in the previous 50. I somewhat agree with this statistic. However, only in certain respects. I believe that consumers, absolutely, their expectations have changed. They expect a lot more from companies over the last 2 years. The transparency that they want, the value that they want, the complete accessibility, the omnipresence, all of these things are new shifts in the marketing field over the last couple of years, and they've made a big impact. Also, I think the tools that we have at our disposal are changing very rapidly. I think that, Snapchat didn't exist 2 years ago. We have this ever-changing arsenal at our disposal, and we have to choose from them and figure out which one's going to be effective, stay ahead of trends, make sure that we're still meeting demands. It makes it a lot of fun, actually, to be a marketer right now. But what I don't believe has changed, I don't believe that the 4 Ps of marketing have changed. I don't believe that the basic foundations of marketing and the rules of marketing have changed. There is still price, product, promotion, and placement. And there always will be. And even if we expand the definition of these words, so if now we decide that the word product is going to include the value we provide and the customer service we provide and the services in addition to product that we provide, that's great. We can expand it. It is still your product. It is still what your company is offering to your consumers. And so I do believe that it has remained the structure that underpins our profession. Same thing with placement. We may not be on shelves in stores, but wherever consumers can find us for whatever they need is where we need to be. And now that, yes, we've broadened the definition of place, it's still the place. You still have to look at it the same way. And so I think those have stayed the same. And the other thing that I think has stayed the same are the structures that define strategy. You will always need to be able to know your objectives and that they map up to your company goals. You're going to need to know your strategies, what tactics those support, put your measurements in place, plan out your timelines, and get the game underway. So I would say on a scale of 1 to 10, I agree with the statistic about a 5. The next one, 47% of small business owners handle their marketing efforts on their own. Whether you are a small business or not, the sense of overwhelm that comes with wearing too many hats is one I believe we can all emphasize with. Businesses today expect more from their employees than ever before. And now that we never disconnect, at the end of the day, I think that responsibilities and expectations are bleeding over into the evening. They're bleeding past the boundaries of the workday. And so expectations are set that go beyond 8 hours. And I think that we're all feeling the pressure of that on a regular basis. 45% of marketers still don't formally evaluate their analytics for quality or accuracy, or even worse, don't know if they do or not. This is one I don't understand, and if I can give you any piece of advice today, figure out your analytics. Figure out what numbers matter. There are only certain numbers that matter to you, so find out what they are. So your business knows what its goals are for the year. There will be numbers to watch to make sure that you're heading that way. Trickle down to marketing. There are numbers attached to your objectives that map up to company goals. Find out what they are. They're your key performance indicators, KPIs. If you don't know that acronym, now you know. So you want your key performance indicators to show you if you're meeting your objectives. Don't let these fall by the wayside. Whether you have an agency that is delivering them to you on activities that they're doing throughout the month, make sure they're tracking the right ones and ask them about their accuracy. If you're doing them internally, make sure you have the right ones and that you're doing them consistently. And last, nearly half of 1,000 small business owners, which I love the way they said that, so roughly 500 small business owners surveyed said they don't know whether they're marketing effectively, and 14 know that they're not. I think the statistic is probably true for more than just small businesses. So if you feel this way, you're definitely not alone. Another way to know you're not alone is that there are some common mistakes that we always see with clients. So when we talk about their strategy, these 5 will normally come up whether it's a small business or a large business that we are working with. So I want to talk through some of these and then move on to how we can set the groundwork for your strategy. The first is who has time to plan. And one of the concerns we heard in the sign-up notes for this webinar specifically is, I have too much to do, I wear too many hats, I don't have time for any of this. So the reason behind not planning is normally a lack of resources or time, but there can also be a lack of organization, a lack of knowledge or leadership, or a culture that doesn't allow for the time. But the cost of not planning is high. How do you focus resources and measure your results if you don't know what you're doing? I promise you, if you take the time to plan, next year will get easier. It will be easier because all you're doing then is executing off of something you already mapped. And that takes a lot of the guesswork and the ins and outs and the what ifs and what fors and the real-time analysis out of it, because now you're just following what you know you're supposed to be doing. I think it will also help establish realistic expectations throughout the company and hopefully provide you with a good argument for more resources. The second is marketing on autopilot. There are a lot of companies that believe that what worked last year will work this year and next year and the year after. For marketing teams that are overstretched, reacting to the next fire they need to put out, which I think we're all constantly reacting to the next fire we need to put out, taking the time to do a post-mortem on last year, evaluate initiatives, realign resources, all that fun stuff, it just isn't a top priority. But post-mortems are so important and they should be done on everything. So one of the things that you can absolutely instill into your marketing department's culture immediately is this idea of always doing a post-mortem. So whether you are looking at the year's strategy, if you're looking at a campaign you just executed, a partnership you just did, an ad campaign that you just did, an influencer you just worked with, it doesn't matter. If it was significant enough for you to execute it, to put resources towards it, and to set a measurement for it, then it is important enough to do a post-mortem. Because what you get to do is you get to go back and learn. And once you learn, then you don't make that mistake again. And that's a blessing. So make sure that you do postmortems on everything that you have in your marketing department. I think that one of the things that you can also do is make sure that management provides the time and space to allow marketing to do postmortems and to make sure that you're not functioning on autopilot. You need to create a culture that places value on measurement, evaluation, and planning. And I'm going to say that again because I think it's really important. The company or management needs to create a culture. It's a culture that you live in that values measurement, evaluation, and planning. The third one is marketing from the inside out. Many of the companies that we work with have never talked to a customer about what they think of the brand. For many companies, that's kind of the status quo. At some point in the evolution of the company, someone, probably the founder or the inventor, decided what the best position was for the brand. And that opinion, which is an opinion, has been handed down from executive to manager to assistant to intern without question or update. But how can a company know if they're not just reaching but truly connecting with their consumer if they've never stopped to ask the right questions? Is it possible that the view from inside is quite different than the view from outside? The true definition these days, especially with social media, of a brand lies with the consumer because perception is reality. So it's always important to take the time, whether you do it during your planning now or you set up incremental points to survey consumers, that you do it on an annual basis. And it doesn't take $50,000 and an agency to do it anymore. There are a ton of tools online that make it very accessible to do consumer research. And if there's ever a point where you need some of those resources, please shoot me an email. I'd be happy to give you some recommendations on things that you can use in order to survey the consumers you already have and figure out some of the answers that you're looking for, even if it's just to make sure you're already on the right track. The fourth one is strategy versus tactic. For companies that do have a marketing strategy for us to review, this is a common issue that we see. Lines get blurred between strategies and tactics. Sometimes you really have to think through which is which when you're in the middle of all those words and all of those wants. So here's something that I think that will help you remember. If you want to use the strategy of guerrilla warfare, then your tactics would be to jump like crazy and throw your spear really hard, right? But if you want to use a sneak attack, then jumping up and down and making a lot of noise is not going to work for you. So your tactics are going to be much different. So the next time you are looking at your strategy and your plan and you're trying to figure out what you're dealing with, just remember guerrilla warfare, jump up and down and throw your spear. All right, and then you'll be able to put those two into the buckets. Shiny object syndrome. This is my favorite only because I've been guilty of it. I think everyone in the world has been guilty of this. It is a symptom of a lack of planning. Shiny object syndrome. It's when an opportunity comes across your desk that seems fun or easy, inexpensive, or cool to do, and you have no way of determining whether it's any good for you or not because you don't have a plan in place, and so you don't know what to measure it by. A great example of this that comes across all the time is remnant ad space. So I don't think that there is an executive, a marketing executive in this industry that hasn't been called by one of our trade publications and they say, oh my gosh, it's your lucky day. We have last minute ad space left for the low price of $350. And compared to the regular $1,300, that's a great deal. But what if you're not planning to do any print advertising? Do you still take that opportunity? What if all you know about your strategy is that, or if you do know your strategy, is that you want to be able to map all activities for 2017 to your sales funnel? Well, that's a really tough one to map. And so maybe even though it's great value and it's hard to say no to, maybe the answer is no. But if you don't have a strategy, you don't know the answer. Another good example of this is social media. Social media tools are free. How easy is that? But the cost of being on a social media channel is resources and time and investment in creativity and all of the things that go into being there full time, because once you're there, consumers expect you to be there. And you don't have to be on all the social media channels. You don't, just because it's there, it doesn't mean you should be. So again, shiny object syndrome, be very careful of it and know that it stems from a place of lack of planning. But we're going to talk about how to avoid all these issues. So as of this moment right now, you have 74 days to create your strategy for 2017. And that sounds, sometimes I say that out loud and it sounds like a significant amount of time. I'm like, that's totally doable. And sometimes I look at the number 74 and I'm like, that is way too little time. So I think it depends on your mood at the moment. But what I can tell you is these 74 days are chock full of other things to do. You have everything you're supposed to do every single day. You have holidays coming up. You have holiday promotions coming up. You have vacation time coming up. These days are going to fly by. So we need to make sure that you've got a plan in place to get the most out of them so that 2017 is ripe and ready to go on January 1st. So your strategy should be built on 3 time periods. The past, of course, what you've learned, what you know today to be true, and what you envision for the future. All 3 of these things are critical, and so often in the rush to get things done, people leave 1 or more of these out of the equation. And ironically, it's normally looking at past accomplishments. Literally, people will skip talking about what they just did in order to move forward. But that's why we're going to talk through the questions that you need to ask. Talk through the questions that you need to ask, or that your marketing agency should ask you as you develop your strategy. And all of these questions are based on your resources, your plan, your customers, and your competitive landscape in the past, present, and future. So if that helps you kind of categorize them in your mind, we're going to hit on all of those things, but we're going to log them by time zone. Time zone, that's the wrong word, but by timing. So let's dig into the questions you need to ask. Keep in mind, you are going to receive a PDF version of these questions, so don't try and write them all down. There's no reason to. You can jot down notes on what I say, but you'll get what you need afterwards. So don't worry. And a quick word to those of you who may just be launching your business. The first section isn't going to directly apply to you because you don't have a past. What you will want to do is take the time to do primary and secondary research, develop a SWOT, determine target audiences, and more. So there's plenty for you to do, but that's just another webinar. So the past. The first step, of course, in moving forward, ironically, is looking backward. So this process should include the entire team, and I really highly recommend that you pull in everyone from executive leadership down. The key is to have a very high-level view of how the success mapped to the overall company success. So you want that portion of perspective in there, all the way down to the nitty-gritty. And so this is a process, and it really is an interesting one. But the key is to be very honest about what worked, what didn't, and why. If you went through the planning process for 2016, there should be a 12-month strategy in place. Whether you've used it as a working document or you haven't seen it since January, that's fine. Now's the time to pull it out and conduct really a very unbiased appraisal of the results you've gotten and the success measurements you put in place. So we're going to walk through the questions that are going to help you with the past. Did you develop a marketing strategy last year and use it as a tool? My recommendation is, it's hard sometimes. It's hard to go through and create a strategy and not save it to the server and consider it done. But you can't. It would behoove you to, instead of saving it on your server somewhere deep in a file, actually just save it to your desktop. Just take your entire marketing plan and save it to your desktop so that it is always with you. It needs to be a tool. It needs to be something that your entire team uses on a regular basis. It can turn into a timeline, a checklist, literally a roadmap. We recommend that monthly marketing meetings are set. So every month, you and your entire team, your marketing team, would sit down, or if that's just you, please sit down by yourself and work through where the team is to date on the execution of the strategies and tactics. And then at 6 months, do a mid-year check-in with executives. So you want a top-level check-in to see if any realignment needs to be made. You will have updates on where the company is on their goals. You will have updates on how far you've gotten in 6 months, what has worked, what hasn't, and you will be able to readjust and make some serious strides on the back half of the year if you're able to really look at it. So taking a beat, taking a moment to do that work, I think is really important once a month on a small basis, and then at the 6-month mark to really see if you're doing what you need to be doing. Do you have the right strategies in place to support the larger goals of the business? Sometimes what seems like a really good idea just doesn't work. It's happened to me, it's happened to everyone I've ever worked with. And that's why in reality, marketing is just market research done over and over and over again. The idea is to plan and then adjust upon learning. You can't just put out a plan and assume that you are brilliant and everything that you just decided is going to happen. That's just not marketing. So realize ahead of time and make room for learning from what you're doing and saying that didn't work and let's try this, and keeping abreast of best practices and what other people are doing and what you see out there that resonates with you, but be in a constant state of learning. And I think that will really help your strategy evolve over the course of the year and the course of every year to become better and stronger and a bigger tool for your business. Did you execute all of the strategies and tactics that you planned for at the beginning of the year? If you didn't get to them all, was it because of timing? Did you overshoot and compromise your team's success? Or was it possibly the allocation of resources impacted the success of your strategies because you just weren't able to get everything done? Whatever the reason is, you need to take a really hard look at why things didn't happen, because you can rectify that for next year, but it needs to be top of mind for you. Other questions that you should ask: did you track the success of your strategies against measurements? We talked about how important analytics are earlier in this presentation. So keep in mind that you do need to continually track your strategies. What platforms and campaigns worked and why? This is going to be important as you decide which platforms you're going to be on. I think campaigns are very creative ideas, and I think that they can be adjusted on a continuous basis, but your platforms, where you're investing, where your consumers want and expect and need to see you, I think that those need to be more stable. And so I think you need to choose them wisely and then really monitor them so that you know if they're working the way that you need them to or not. What factors supported or undermined the success of each tactic? And was your budget for the year on target? And lastly, what have your competitors done that have resonated with key markets? And a quick note on competitors. I don't ever recommend that you watch your competitors too closely. I think that leads to matching them or following them, and I don't ever want you to do that. I think that there is a reason to keep an eye on them. I think that understanding where they have found success points to needs that consumers have that you might want to take a look at, but don't check in too often. There are other ways that you can take a look at what's resonating with your key markets, including like-minded companies and other segments of the pet industry. That's always a good way to see what consumers are really reacting to. Also, if you find products or companies outside of the pet industry that are just aiming for pet parents, that is also a really good way to look at how companies are gaining traction with our target market. So that's kind of the past. Those are really big questions to be asking, and trust me, for as quickly as we're able to run through them on this presentation, those take a lot of conversation with a lot of people in the room that have opinions. And so just be sure that when you come to the table, you carve out enough time for those conversations to happen and to really think them through, because it's those learnings, it's that information that is going to make you smarter tomorrow. So today, and as they say, today is a brand new day. It may look completely different today than it did from last year or last quarter or last month. So this is the time to take a read on the factors that will affect your success for marketing that you know as of today. Everything from political climate, which I know we're all watching with bated breath right now, and cultural changes to competitive shifts and consumer demands. You can take a look at all of them in real time and see if there's anything that is going to inform any of your decisions coming up. So here are some questions that we're going to ask. Do you have the right measuring tools in place to ensure you communicate success to management? Since this review literally coincides directly with your end of year reporting, much of what you do can be fodder for the other. So one of the questions that you should ask is, do I have measuring tools that are allowing me to answer the questions that leadership has about our effectiveness? Do you have the numbers that matter most to your leadership team? Because this will align you with larger strategic business goals for the year. That's why transparency from management is so important. So if you need to ask the questions, ask them. Find out from management, what are you tracking? What key performance indicators are you looking at on a regular basis to know if this company is healthy? And then you can go down to where you're working, what your objectives are, and match KPIs. Does that make sense? So that's what we're going to look to do. By connecting the dots, of course, you're looking to show the impact marketing has had on the business as a whole, but you're also, the big goal that I believe marketing, it's a huge job for marketing, is to move us from a cost center to a strategic investment. So if you're not able to make that shift in management's mind this year, then that should be one of your goals for next year, personally and as a team. How do we move the view of marketing as a cost center over to a strategic investment? And what kind of measurements do we have to put in line in order to prove our value? Have your company goals changed for the upcoming year? Company goals are going to shift, they should. So be sure that you know what they are and you ladder up to them like we just talked about. Are your current vendors delivering on objectives you set for them? I mean, this includes everybody. This includes your marketing agency, your graphic designers, SEO specialists, even your printers. Literally any vendor that you have, that you work with, you should be reviewing before you re-up for 2017. Do not stay with a vendor out of habit. There is no reason to. There are plenty of There are plenty of service providers out there that can do incredible work. So find one that suits you, but make sure that you are actually measuring their success and holding their feet to the fire, because that's really what it's all about. Are your resources aligned correctly? You need to really be honest about this. Are you getting what you want from what you have? And that's a really important question. Are your marketing activities connecting with your target customer? Do you have the right message? Do they care what you're talking about? Do they talk about what you're talking about? Do you know what they're talking about? You need to find the message that's going to get you out of that chatter we were talking about earlier, away from the clutter of this industry and into a message that drives you into a unique place. Are your products positioned correctly to meet customer expectations as you move forward? Sometimes it's a tweak, sometimes it's a new product line, but just make sure that your positioning is still on point. Just take a look. A gut check is always a good thing. Has the definition of your target customer changed during the year? This is so important. We have so many shifts going on with the demographics that we're addressing. Millennials have rocked our boat, and that is awesome. But you need to know why. You need to know how they have changed what we're doing and how to change what you're doing in response. So some information about millennials. This is very top line. You can find more information about millennials on our website, and if you ever have any other questions about them, I can send you some resources that we tap into as an agency to make sure that we know what's going on. But millennials are an interesting demographic for us because they are the first group, the first generation that has ever used their pet as an extension of themselves. So because millennials live their life both online and offline, their pets have become almost these spokes animals, these spokespeople for who they are. And that's why millennials are more apt to groom their dogs and dress their dogs than they are to take their dogs to the veterinarian. So their priorities are different than what we're used to. And also, as we talked about before, their expectations are different. You know, they expect things to be customized and omnipresent and always available, and to reaffirm and reassure and educate. I mean, there's all these expectations. It's hard to even find all of the words for them. So when you really get down into what millennials want and need, you need to figure out who these people are. And the best way to do that, whether you're talking about millennials or boomers who are also changing, they're getting older, they need very different things from us now, you need to create consumer profiles. And this will allow you to speak to a person and understand that person. And that is the embodiment of your target market. And you may have more than one, and that's fantastic, but know who they are. We even go so far as to give them names. So we literally will talk to Rebecca when we need to, so that we can get the message across to her, and then we know it's resonating because we did the work beforehand. Have your customer needs, perceptions, or preferences changed? That was covered a bit in what we just talked about, but make sure that you know exactly what their needs are. There is something called tension. So what customers want versus what they're not getting, there is a tension there, and that's not always product focused. That is normally life focused. So find the tension that defines the problem that your product answers. Okay, you want attention, find it. Has there been a social or cultural shift that will impact your marketing? I think we're about to come across a lot of shifts in the United States with the new president. So is anything going to impact what you're doing? It may not, but it may. So take a close look. Are there any new competitors in the category? You should always be keeping an eye out for new competitors. They will normally bring with them something worth noting. So whether they have a new technology, a new perspective, a new ingredient, a new position, whatever it is that makes them think that they can compete is worth taking a look at. So just make sure that you always know who's coming down and joining you on this lovely playing field. So once you have those questions about the present, and again, I'm going to send you these questions in a format that you can use in a meeting, so don't worry. But once you understand how the year's gone and where you stand today, really the only thing left to do is plan for next year. And planning is everything. So this includes cutting your least performing marketing activities, adjusting moderately performing activities, and doubling down on your best. The last thing that you have to do after that is make room for new initiatives that you want to take on. So you're going to keep, cut, change. All right? So just keep repeating that to yourself. That's your whole goal. When you look at all the things you've done this year, you want to evaluate them by keep, cut, change after you answer all of these questions. So for our list of questions for the future, is your marketing focus going to change for next year with new products, new brands, or new messages? For ongoing success in, well, as a company, but as a marketing department as well, there always should be a balance between exploitation and exploration. There was a TED Talk done by a man named Newt Kahn, and he actually was the one that came to the table, and so I'm using his idea of exploitation versus exploration. He was talking about it at a corporate level. I believe that it is also very applicable to marketing. It is the balance between fully capitalizing on what you know works while leaving room to explore new concepts, platforms, audiences, etc. So just make sure that when you're looking at your resources and you're mapping out your year and you've got your strategies laid out, that you have a section that you know is going to work. You know it's going to work because you just answered all the questions we've been through and you know that it's working. And then leave space for exploring, because there are new things on the horizon. There are things worth trying. There are people worth talking to that you haven't talked to before. Leave room for it. Leave the space. Do you have the bandwidth to take on new initiatives? So you should take on new initiatives, but you need to make sure that you have those resources. So be realistic. Over-promising and under-delivering is bad for the company, and it's really bad for team morale. Nobody feels good when they don't hit their mark. So don't put people in a position to have to justify or make excuses when in reality they never had the resources to do their job in the first place. Do you need to further supplement your team with outside help to meet the year's goals? Do you need to, and can you afford to, hire help? Sometimes really the cost of not being able to do something or doing it internally is much higher than hiring somebody externally. Now, granted, I would love for you all to hire me, so I will always take that argument. But really, you have to weigh the pros and cons of trying to execute everything internally or dropping things versus pulling outside help in. So definitely a question to be weighed. Will the same budget, well, that went fast. Will the same budget, we'll just go through it, support your new initiatives for this coming year, which I think we've covered in the conversation a little bit? Will you be targeting new customers through new products or channels? There are opportunities in new places, so this should always be looked at. I think that this will map up to your overall company goals, but there's also a place for marketing to take a look at what you have, and after all of these questions are answered, see if there's a reason to reposition what you offer. If you have a product or a service, or you're incredible at customer service, or if you have something that you think is special and just hasn't resonated, reposition it. Reposition it to match what you know about your consumers, and see if it flips the switch. It's kind of cool when you get to reposition something and see new life be breathed into it. Are there going to be any demographic shifts that will affect your marketing? Always important to know. Will there be any major changes in your supply chain? This needs to be answered within your department and outside of your department, because if there are changes even in your product development supply chain or in your manufacturing supply chain, this will all affect marketing, and you need to know that this is coming because you're going to have to deal with consumers. So make sure that you have transparency company-wide to supply issues on everything. Are there global or social factors that you now need to take into consideration when you look to 2017? And lastly, are there new technologies or platforms that need to be considered? And a note on that, keep in mind the need to focus. Just because there are technologies and tools out there doesn't mean you need to use them. So a bit of concrete advice that I will give you, my recommendation is to find 2 or 3 channels outside of your website and packaging. So those are things you own, use them, but find 2 or 3 communication channels outside of those that you can do really, really well, and let the rest go. So I've seen the greatest success for all of my clients on Facebook, Instagram, and email marketing. Those are the 3 that drive the most engagement for us, drive the most traffic to websites, and drive the most conversions once consumers are on the website. So if I take those 3 measurements, I know that these 3 channels are the ones that my clients focus on. But I reevaluate them with every new client I get and make sure that they're still correct. So when you look at your channels, and if right now you are using 7 communication vehicles, I want you to look at them very closely. And if you can pare down to become more effective at a few than less effective at all, I would challenge you to do that in 2017. Just like this question, are there new technologies that need to be considered? Are there current technologies we need to drop? I think that is the other side of that question. So those were the questions, right? Those are the questions, past, present, and future, that we believe will allow you to gain the knowledge and the learning that you can then funnel into your strategy. Because your strategy is going to consist of objectives that map up to your company goals, your goals, your strategies, your measurements, your tactics, timelines, execution plans. This is such an exciting process, and these are such great things to put together, but you must fill them with knowledge-based decisions. So make sure to ask the questions that will make you successful. It is all I want to see you do. And if you need any support in getting through those questions, or if you have follow-up questions you want to ask me, I'm happy to help. But I want you to dive into this list of strategic items. Like, dive into this list armed, knowing that you know what you need to know to go to 2017. Because for a company, a brand, or a product to be successful, there needs to be a marketing plan. Spend the time, spend the money, spend the energy. It is an investment that cannot be overvalued. That is my big ending statement, and I mean it from the bottom of my heart. So as a last bit of information for you, there's no hard sell at the end of this. I really just wanted to make sure that if you all do need to get in touch with me, if you want to work together, or if you just have questions, or if you want some of the resources that I mentioned earlier, please feel free to reach out to me. This is my phone number, my direct phone number. You can find my entire team at info@offleashcom.com. So anyone who's able to answer your questions will absolutely do so. If you want to reach me specifically, it's just Sarah with an H at offleashcom.com. I would welcome any emails from any of you at that email address as well. And now I'm happy to open this up to any questions that you all have that may have come up during the presentation, or that you had when you first got here. So are there any questions that we need to answer before we close the presentation? Okay, so one of the things that I want to make sure that I do before we leave is really look back at some of the comments that you all made when you signed up. So some of the things that we heard when you all signed up and we asked you to tell us what you were most concerned about with your strategy for 2017 was, I need more time. I want to understand the key steps to a product launch. I want to learn how to create effective marketing strategy. So that was a great question and pretty much on par with what we talked about. How to do offline marketing and whether you should is a really good question. Leveraging digital channels, which are the current tactics that we should be using? And then, of course, just strategic planning in general. So a note that I think that can answer all of those items is that you must carve out time to think. Strategy is a lot of thought. It is research and learning and digging into what you've done with all of the questions that we just talked about, and thinking about where you want to go and how to best get there. So a lot of the questions and concerns that you all have are pretty tactical, but you can't answer those questions until you look at where you are and where you want to go. So I'm happy to answer some of these one-on-one, like I said, via email, if that's what you all would like to do. But I just wanted to make one last comment about the fact that if you choose to go down the path of laying the foundation for your strategy for 2017, like we talked about today, I think a lot of your concerns will be answered naturally through that process. I hope you learned a lot today. I hope we were able to provide value and that you have a little bit more confidence heading into this third quarter and being able to plan for 2017. As promised, we will send you a PDF of all of the questions. And as a bonus, I'm going to go ahead and send you a template for OGSM, which is a strategic planning tool that guides you by objectives, goals, strategies, and measures. So I will send that to you as well, so that you have another tool from us that you would be able to use as you set your sights on success for next year. Thank you all so much for being here. I can't thank you enough. Have a good day. Bye-bye.